Whether it's a ghost car, a car with a ghost at the wheel, or something even more strange and unexplainable, here are the top 10 cursed cars you were warned not to drive. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the Golden Eagle. This car was a 1964 Dodge 330 limited edition, and it has been blamed for the death of around 14 people. It was said that this car started out as a police car originally, but there were 3 officers assigned to this car who all ended up taking their own lives, and other people's lives in horribly violent ways. Not in the car, but still, super weird that this all seemed to happen after they had been using the car for work. Because of this strange correlation, it ended up being sold off to another man. Throughout the 80s and 90s, it was said that because of the rumored cursed car, it became a point of interest for vandals. People began to vandalize the car only to meet their own untimely fates, which were all met in strange ways. For example, it was said that one vandal died from being struck by lightning, and another ended up having his head removed by an 18-wheeler. It is said that the curse is so strong that one person decided to merely touch the car, and it sent him into madness as he went on to commit atrocious crimes after that. The car now belongs to Wendy Allen, who supposedly collects and decorates haunted cars for a living, so it seems as though it's finally found its home. Far, far, far away from everyone else. In our number 9 spot today, we have James Dean's car. Famous actor James Dean passed away from a car accident on September 30th, 1955. He was driving his silver Porsche 550 Spyder, which he had just purchased recently. This was only the beginning of the car's curse, however, as after James' passing, the remnants of the totaled car were bought by a man named George Barris. He decided to sell the parts of the car to James' fans, but when the car was being worked on and taken apart, it ended up falling on a mechanic and it crushed him to death. These 2 incidents are more than enough to now consider this car cursed, but it still continues on. Once the people who had purchased some of the car parts began receiving them, more strange things happened. 3 of the people who received parts ended up in car accidents, all of which were sadly quite severe. The shell of the car was also stolen, and to this day it has never been recovered. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Black Volga. The story of the Black Volga starts off when it was realized that this limousine was found to be linked to multiple disappearances over the years. The incidents occurred in the 60s and 70s in Ukraine, and the stories are weird. Basically, the most well-known story pertaining to the vehicle says that one day 2 girls approached the limo and were suddenly sucked inside. A witness saw this happen and went up to the car, but there were no signs of the people that he had just seen. Suddenly, this witness saw flashes of white lights, and the next thing they knew, they found themselves waking up several days later with a pounding headache. Apparently, other people have come forward with similar stories to this one, but no one can quite figure out what's behind this mystery. Some people even think that the Black Volga is driven by Satan himself. In our number 7 spot today, we have the jumping car. So this is a weird story that comes to us from Cape Town, South Africa in 2004. One night, a family here who owned a Renault Megane were inside their home when they heard their car start up. Of course, they probably thought that somebody was trying to steal it, but when they looked in the car, no one was there. They decided the best thing to do would be to follow up on it, so they did end up calling the police to come to investigate. When the police got there, they weren't quite sure what to do with this story until, right in front of their own eyes, they watched the car with no one inside start up completely on its own, and this time it proceeded to plow right into a tree. After this crash, they investigated further and found out that the handbrake had been engaged. They of course contacted the car's manufacturer, who said that perhaps the car may have had a faulty or rusty starter, and while that is definitely quite a reasonable explanation, it fails to cover how this car seemed to hit the throttle all on its own. This is all exactly why people believe that this car may have actually been haunted. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Sedan. Of course, it is well known that Bonnie and Clyde were the notorious criminal couple who completed a series of robberies and such back in the 30s. Their crime spree was brought to an end on May 23, 1934, when police surrounded their Ford sedan and let somewhere around 100 bullets fly into it. Of course, this was the end of the couple, but their story has survived on, and that is exactly why the sedan that is riddled with bullet holes found its new home in Whiskey Pete's Casino in Nevada. It's definitely already quite creepy to look at, but there are visitors who claim that something more is going on. Many have suggested that they have felt some sort of presence that makes them extremely uncomfortable when they're anywhere near the car. Others have reported being able to actually see shadowy figures inside of the vehicle. Maybe in the end, Bonnie and Clyde are still around somewhere. In our number 5 spot today, we have JFK's Lincoln. Former United States President John F. Kennedy met an ill fate when he was assassinated during a visit to Dallas, Texas in 1963. On that fateful day, the then president was traveling in the motorcade in his Lincoln SSX 100. Because this is such a historical moment, the car of course wasn't used after that, and instead was part of the investigations before being turned over to the Henry Ford Museum in Michigan. It is here where people have reported some spooky happenings around the Lincoln. Many visitors have reported seeing a man in gray standing near the car, sort of like a shadowy figure that is keeping watch. It is also said that the most common time to see the gray man is during the month of November. This is quite peculiar considering the fact that JFK was actually killed on November 22nd. Could this be a coincidence, or is this the ghost of the former president? In our number 4 spot today, we have Elvis's Cadillac. Elvis was known as the king of rock and roll, and he was also known for his lavish, beautiful red Cadillac. Since his passing, the car hasn't been seen very much, except for those who have apparently seen the ghost version of it. Apparently, many people have reported seeing quite a talented Elvis impersonator driving a red Cadillac through the area, only to realize that this is not the case at all when it suddenly disappears through a wall. At least this one isn't leaving people with creepy feelings or simulating accidents that scare people. Maybe the king of rock just wants to go for a cruise sometimes. If you ever take a trip to Graceland, keep your eyes peeled for the phantom red Cadillac. In our number 3 spot today, we have the van. Dr. Kevorkian was a man who is called an angel of death. If you haven't heard of these people before, they are doctors who like to euthanize patients, normally against their will. I think there's a word for that. This piece of work was doing just that, and one of his most important tools was his large white van. Yeah, huge red flag already. The van later went on to have the nickname Deathmobile, and it made headlines again when it found its way into a pawn shop. The reason the person who had previously had it didn't want it anymore is because they claimed that there were strange occurrences that began happening once it was in their possession. This story led to paranormal investigator and ghost hunter Zach Bagan purchasing it. Apparently people who enter the van immediately feel just overwhelming sadness, and they also feel like there are unseen eyes that are watching them at all times. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Death Limo. Okay, so this car is not only apparently haunted, but it's a huge part of history as well. So the Graf and Stift Death Limo was the one that the Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand was in with his wife when it stalled outside of a cafe for seemingly no reason. It was here that the pair were killed, which is one of the events that really triggered the start of the First World War. This would already be quite the story, but things only continued on for this haunted car. Throughout the next 12 years, there is said to have been 13 more deaths that were attributed to the car. One man went crazy while driving the car, there was a military police officer who crashed it with other people inside, there was another owner who also crashed it. You know, just a lot of terrible things happening around one single car. The vehicle now sits in the War History Museum in Vienna. Now here's the thing. You, like I am right now, would likely be thinking, after all of those accidents, the car should be absolutely totaled, right? Apparently it's not, and this is just another thing that adds to the mystery surrounding it. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Surrey Ghost Car. On December 11th, 2002, a call came into the Surrey Police Department. The caller reported that they had just seen a car lose control and run off the road and then presumably crash. It was of course an emergency call, but not necessarily anything out of the ordinary. That was until authorities got to the location and realized that they couldn't find any kind of evidence of a crash. They kept searching, and they ended up finding a maroon colored car that was nose down in a ditch nearby, but this car was covered in so much undergrowth that it must have been here for months. This means that somehow this crash went undetected for 5 months, and worst of all, so did the body that lay nearby. Using dental records, they were able to identify the body as a man who had been wanted for robbery since July of that year. It is said that the sighting of the car leaving the road was a ghostly replay of the events that had taken place 5 months prior. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I'll see you next time. Bye!